Hello everyone, David Adler, President of the Australian Jewish Association here, and I'm very privileged to have with me today Kellie Sloane, who's the endorsed Liberal candidate for Vaucluse in the upcoming New South Wales election. Kellie, welcome and thank you for making time to do this video for the AJA platform.
David, thanks so much for having me and giving me an opportunity to meet your members virtually and to have a chat with you. I appreciate it.
Okay, so for those that don't know Kellie Sloane, who are you and why are you standing?
I'm a local parent. My husband Adam and I have 3 boys who go to school locally in the electorate of Vaucluse. I used to be a journalist, so used to sitting in this chair, less comfortable with answering the questions. Many of you might have seen me in your lounge rooms as a host on Today's Show or anchoring the news bulletins on Channel 9, a little bit of time at Channel 7 as well. And then I got to a point in our lives when the kids were little that I wanted to really make a difference to the community and be an active participant in the change that I wanted to see. So that's when I moved into the not-for-profit space and got involved with an organisation called Life Education.
Right.
Life Education is the largest provider of health education to Australian children around the country outside of the school system. So drug and alcohol education, cyber safety, respectful relationships, bullying. And I was on their board. I was a volunteer, then on their board, then the state CEO and then the national CEO.
Wow.
And I've left that organisation to run for politics, to make an even bigger contribution to our community, I hope.
So what would be your major values, major priorities that you would base your parliamentary career on?
Well, I grew up in a family where, it was family and community was everything. You look after each other, and that should form the basis for all of your values. And that commitment to community is something I hold very, very strongly. It's something that was an anchor value for me as the CEO of a big organisation that worked in communities sort of locally here in the seat of Vaucluse, but right across the country. And so I want to apply that as a politician, hopefully, and community involves looking out for each other, making sure we join together, that we have the freedom to practice our faith, that we feel secure in our communities, and that we look after each other.
Well, let's talk about just a couple of specific issues that are related to the Jewish community. You're aware that there is unfortunately a rise in anti-Semitism that's occurring worldwide. Australia and New South Wales is not exempt. Now, I asked you prior to us starting whether you were aware of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. How did you answer that question?
Well, I do, and I'm very supportive of that definition. And I know that the Liberal government was one of the first, the Liberal Nationals, one of the first state governments to endorse that definition. And the definition is incredibly important. I mean, it's a set of words, but words define what's right and what's wrong. And it calls out anti-Semitism, whether it's online, whether it's people sitting in a room together, whether it's public, whether it's in our education system. And that definition is incredibly important, and uniting behind that, and it is bipartisan, is incredibly important too.
Well, you're right, it does have bipartisan support. We would hope that in the next parliament some work can be done on implementation, and if you're elected, no doubt you'll be tapped on the shoulder to assist with that. The other principal issue in the Jewish community of widespread concern, of course, is Israel.
Yeah.
The Australian Jewish community is by and large very supportive. Have you ever been to Israel?
Yes, and I'd wanted to go to Israel all my life, really, and I had the opportunity about 5 years ago as a participant on a Women Leaders mission to Israel that was organised by the Australian Israel Chamber of Commerce, and I went with about 20 other women, and I was surprised about how much in awe I was, about how spiritually connected I felt to Jerusalem in particular. And
amazing place.
It's such a special place. Extraordinary, really, to walk the streets that have been walked for millennia, and also then to experience the vibrancy of Tel Aviv. And then also to be absorbed in the startup culture as well, which was the reason I went. I'd read Startup Nation. I wanted to apply, those learnings to the work I was doing in education. And it was where I met, or actually had the first opportunity to engage with Gabrielle Upton, who has been, hopefully is my predecessor, the local member for the last 12 years. And we sat together on the bus and I said, I want to make a bigger contribution. I'd love to do what you're doing one day. And she said, join my branch. And here we are. So she's now passing the baton to me and is a big supporter.
Okay. Now, I know that on some policies there has been criticism that there's not much difference between Labor and Liberal. I don't want to get into the wide policies, but on the attitude to Israel, say, do you see any difference between Labor and Liberal? It's a bit of a Dorothy Dix question.
No, it is, because it's stark, and where do I begin? And I will begin with one of the most important, which is that my federal colleagues have a policy that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and that is right, and it is proper, and it is, it shouldn't be up to us as Australia to tell our very good friends in Israel where their capital should be. Okay. So that's a very that was a policy that came in federally under the Liberal coalition government federally, and then of course has been overturned since by Labor. So that's important. At state level, look, I can only point to the consistency of support and respect for the Jewish community, whether it's investments by the Liberal government in the Jewish Museum just down the road from here, which is really a really important part of educating young people, whether it was taking a stand against and outlawing the public display of Nazi symbols. That was another thing. So you've seen over and over a consistency in approach, and I would struggle to find consistent representations of the same thing under the previous governments.
I think you're actually being a bit kind.
I try to be kind.
We see the possibility, unfortunately, that Labor is at a tipping point and that there are some malevolent forces behind the scenes. One last question. There is a body in the New South Wales Parliament called the New South Wales Parliamentary Friends of Israel. In the event that you're elected, do you see yourself as part of that group?
Of course, and in many respects, I already am part of that group. I attend their events. When I was first pre-selected, they were one of the first groups to sort of come around me and say, how can we support you, Kellie? And I embraced that. So Scott Farlow, who's been leading that, he's a friend. I commend him on the work that he's done. And it was that body that pushed as well their colleagues to promote the new definition of anti-Semitism. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you for your time. I want to keep the video short, but in view of your commitment to joining the New South Wales Parliamentary Friends of Israel, you can't do so without the Australia-Israel friendship pin. This is a combination of the Australian flag and Israel flag, and indeed, here it is. And
I will put it on now and wear it regardless of the outcome, because I would wear that with absolute pride.
Okay. Kellie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, David.